Hi friends, so glad you're here with me today on our See the Light, Yes You Can Draw Club. I'm Pat Nepley, I'm your master artist. I'll be with you through all of these club meetings. I hope you brought some friends along for this club meeting. It'll be great fun. This is club meeting number 15, and we're still talking about color blending, but we get to use my favorite tool today, chalk pastels. Okay, for today's meeting we're going to need several supplies, so let's go over them together. You're going to need a set of basic chalk pastels. The softer, the better, but sometimes they can be pricey, so a set like this is great, at least 12 colors. A kneaded eraser, that's the best kind of eraser for pastels. It looks like this. Some papers. Now it's important that the paper says either pastel paper or charcoal paper. You really can't use the paper that comes right out of your copier or printer at home. It's a little too soft. Any type of thing to help blend, like a box of tissues, your old white but clean sock, some of these ear swabs, and this is a special tool. If you can find one, that's great. The French word for it is tortillon, but it's sometimes just called a blending stick. It's simply rolled paper, very tight point. Now, I always like to keep baby wipes handy because our hands are going to get really messy, and baby wipes are great to clean up so that we don't smudge our pastel drawing. I'm so excited about pastels. One of the reasons is the color is so bright and so vivid. In fact, have you seen Miss Gloria, our friend from our See the Light DVDs? She uses chalk pastels, and she did that amazing DVD, The Crossmaker. I hope you've seen it. Those colors are so bright, they come right off the page. She has a great time using chalk pastels to share the story of Jesus. And what a great gift that is. I mean Jesus. In fact, there's a great Bible verse. Let's share it together, okay? It's in the book of John. In fact, I bet you know it. It's John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one beloved Son, so that whoever believes in him would not perish, but have eternal life. God loves us so much, he sent his Son Jesus to be the sacrifice for us. What an amazing gift Jesus is to us. Well, I love looking at Miss Gloria's art, like the Crossmaker, to see the story come to life in chalk drawings. And we're going to learn some basics about how to use chalk pastels today. Now, some things you need to know about a chalk pastel. I'm just going to pick one up. Let's see, I'll go with this one. Chalk pastels are made of the same substance that chalk that you use in school would be. Maybe you use sidewalk chalk. But sidewalk chalk or blackboard chalk has a lot of white chalk in it, so they're usually very pale. The pastels we're going to be using have a little more pigment than they do chalk, and so the color is richer and more vibrant. But right away you can see that pastels are messy. They're very dusty, just like chalk is, and so it can come off onto your fingers very easily. Well, that means it can come off onto your clothes easily too. So whenever you're working with chalk pastels, I would recommend you get an old t-shirt or an old shirt like this and put it over your good clothing. Something that you won't mind getting messy. Always check with mom or dad first. And roll up your sleeves. One of the frequent things I see young artists do is they forget to push up or roll up their sleeves, and as they're drawing, they drag it through the chalk pastel. Very difficult to get out in the laundry, so that's why we wear an old shirt and we roll up the sleeves or keep the sleeves short. So in addition to being messy and dusty, chalk pastels are fragile. They break very easily. Now, I don't mind breaking this because small pieces of pastel are great fun to use, and I'll show you later when we use the side of a pastel. But you don't want to press too hard when you learn to work with a pastel so that you don't break it into really tiny pieces. But little pieces like this are fine. In fact, most of my pastels at home in my studio are small pieces. So chalk pastels are messy, dusty. That means the dust is going to fall when you draw. They're fragile, but they're so much fun to work with because the color is amazing. In fact, there's several artists that love to work with pastels, so why don't we look at some of their artwork now. One of them is Toulouse-Lautrec. Now, Toulouse-Lautrec was a French artist, and he would work with pastels and look around him and just the people that he saw every day. And so if you look very closely at this pastel drawing, you'll see lots of small, sketchy marks made with the pastel. That's because Lautrec used the end of the pastel. So now, if I demonstrate that for you, I'm going to use the end of the pastel, a corner of it, and make some lines, just like that. Now, another artist, a French artist who used pastels a lot, was Edgar Degas. Take a look at this painting called Entering the Stage. Now, this is ballerinas, and he loved to work with ballerinas in the studio. A lot of his chalk drawings are pastels of ballerinas in the studio, but you'll notice he used the side of his pastel. Take a look at the bottom of the tutu of these two dancers. You'll notice very scrumbled netting on these dancers' outfits, and that's because he used the side of the pastel. So if I demonstrate that now, I'll take a piece of white, and just like you can with a crayon, I'll use the side of my pastel to get much more solid block of color. So you can use the end of the pastel to make marks, or you can use the side of the pastel. Now, do you see how easily you can see the pastel on my toned paper? Let's talk a little bit more about paper. Standard paper that comes out of a copier, or even drawing paper that you use with pencil, is very smooth. In fact, if I were to rub it with my finger, barely any sound. Very smooth. That's great for holding pencil, but not for our dusty pastels. In order for the dusty pastel color to stay gripped to the paper, you need what's called teeth. No, not the teeth in your mouth. You need to have a tooth or teeth on the paper, little tiny rough surface. You can tell that it's much different from standard copier paper. So it's very important to have the right paper for pastels. It has to grip all that dust. Now, I prefer, just like Miss Gloria, to use toned paper. So grays or tans. You can use peach or pale yellow or yellow, blue, green. But white is not always the best for pastel drawing. You want the pastels to pop off the page, and they do that on toned paper. Okay, for our first exercise today, we're going to be practicing blending with pastels. So, line up your colors right in front of you. And here's the tip for pastels. We always work from dark to light. It's the opposite of when you work with colored pencil. Colored pencil, you work from light to dark because you want to be able to erase. But when you work with pastels, because they're so dusty, if you do light first and then dark, the dark dust will get on your light colors and make them muddy. And we don't want that. So what we're going to do is take our basic 6 colors from our color wheel. We're going to start with green, then move to the primary blue, secondary purple. We're going in order on the color wheel. Primary red, secondary orange, and our last primary yellow. Now, I could place a lot of colors in between, depending on my set. But I want to show you color blending that you can do with the straight pastel. So first, I need to clean off my hands. They're dirty from handling the pastels, and before I get started on a new project, I want to make sure I'm clean. So I'm going to use a baby wipe. Now, I will use my fingers to do some blending. I don't recommend it for beginning artists, and I'll tell you why. Number one, you get very dirty very quickly, and you often forget to clean up. The second thing is, God made it so that we have natural oils in our skin. And if we use our fingers a lot for blending, the oils on our skin get into our drawing. I would rather you use something like a tissue or an old clean sock, or even one of these swabs, or a blending stump. So since we're going to start with dark to light and we're going to go in order, we're going to try 2 rainbow bars going across your page. So grab a piece of toned paper, and I'm going to use the end of my pastel and make marks with my green. Then down here, I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to use the side of my pastel, like that. Great! You can see how that color just pops right off. Now I'm going to take blue, which is next in our color wheel, and I'm going to overlap right where I just did the green. I'm going to make some marks with the blue. And down here, using the side of my pastel, I'm going to overlap and then just some blue. Now, you can see some blending is happening right on the surface of the paper. But let's see what happens if I take my sock, put my hand in my sock, take a finger, tighten the fabric around my finger, and very lightly, we don't want to pick up the chalk pastel that we just put on the paper, so very lightly, I'm going to blend where the blue and the green overlap, and you see I have beautiful blue-green. Now I'm going to move my sock so it's clean and do the same thing down here where I used the side of my pastel. So I've gone in my color bars so far from green to blue-green to blue, so the color blending happens very easily with pastels as the dust mixes. So let's keep going. Grab your next one, which is purple, leave some blue, overlap a little bit, use the end of your pastel. Down here, overlap a little bit and use the side of your pastel. Great! Keep going. We're not going to blend yet. We're just going to keep going to the next on the color wheel, which is red. With my strokes, I overlap a little bit, then I just do straight red. Down here, I overlap a little bit, and then I have straight red. Great! Next one in the color wheel is orange. Use the end, overlap a little bit, then straight orange. Down here with my edge, the side of my pastel. There we go, orange. One more. The lightest in our color wheel is yellow. Use the end of the pastel to overlap a little bit, then straight color. Use the side of my pastel. Great. Now friends, you might notice that the pastel stick itself can get other pastel on it. Always check your pastels before you use them. Turn them. If they need to be dusted off, you can simply take your sock and dust off the pastel stick so it's nice and clean and ready to go. Probably the biggest tip I can give you about working with pastels is be careful and pay attention. And that's because it's so easy to get wrapped up in drawing that you muddy up your colors because you're not checking to make sure things are clean, whether it's your hands or your pastel stick. So before we go any further, we have to blend, so let's blend with some other tools. So a tissue is a great one to use at home. If you don't have a sock handy or you're so worried about using a dirty sock, then you can use a clean tissue every time. Ball up your tissue. Make sure you're not using a tissue with lotion in it. Just a regular tissue is great. And always blend in the direction of where the pastel is. If you blend up and down, you might get pastel dust where you don't want it. So blend in the direction of where the pastels are. Now, here's another tip. You might rub off too much. Supposing you just get carried away and you're rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. Oops, it might have blended nicely, but I took off all that pastel that I just put on. That's the best thing about it. You just grab the pastel stick and you can add back in more color. Now for blending with the side, again, you want to make sure the tissue is clean. Always check first. I'm going to start here with my yellow. I'm barely whisper touching it, and I'm turning my tissue as I blend so that all the colors seamlessly roll into each other. Get a new one, nice and clean. So color blending can happen very easily with pastels because they're so dusty. Now that could be a great thing when you're trying to do a rainbow like this, but it could be a dangerous thing if you're trying to put two fruits in a still life together, like a bright orange and maybe a green pear, and you don't want the colors to blend. That's why you have to pay careful attention of the direction that you're blending. If I were to use this small tool, I can do much smaller areas. Let's say where the red overlaps with the purple color to get a red purple. And you can see with tiny scrumbling, which means little tiny circles, I can blend a very fine area. Another tool for blending that you might not have thought of is the eraser. With your kneaded eraser, which will pick up pastel, I smush it and knead it till it's nice light gray, and I will use this to blend so that I don't see the strokes of the pastel anymore and it looks almost like paint. Now that's going to get dirty, so the next time I go to use that eraser, I want to knead in that color that I just picked up so that it's now hidden away and I have nice light gray to use this eraser another time. Look at how vivid that color shows up on that paper. That's why I'm so excited to be using color pastels. The next time that we're together, friends, we're going to be doing a still life study of fruit. Now, we've used fruit before when we used the apple in some of our drawing lessons, and now that we're into color, we're going to be using a pear. I can't wait to see you next time as we really explore how to use the techniques we learned for soft chalk pastels. I'll see you next time.